Okay, we're going to be talking about representing numbers as fractions, decimals, and percents, and most importantly, how they all mean the exact same number. I think that's what gets lost when kids learn about fractions, decimals, or percents, is that they see them as these foreign entities that have nothing to do with normal numeration as kids are used to thinking about it. So as you'll hear me talk a lot, I like to compare everything to money and start out with the most basic kind of number that we're dealing with that we can. And since we're starting with fractions, let's talk about the most simple fraction a lot of kids know. They know what a half is. Okay, when you break something in half, you are breaking something into two parts, and you have half of it. Well, if you are dealing with money, $1 would represent a whole dollar, and if you're breaking a dollar in half, you would only have 50 cents. Okay, these look different from each other. And then let's look at how the same thing could be represented as a percent. Now, if you have half of a dollar, that's 50 cents. That is also 50% of a dollar. And let's look at how these could be the same or different. Okay? Now 50%, notice that there is no decimal point shown there, but another way that you could write 50% is you could write it as 50.0%. Notice the decimal is to the left of the 5 as a decimal, but as a percent, the decimal is to the right of the 0 in the ones place. So to turn the decimal to a percent, the decimal actually just moved 2 places to the right. A half isn't showing a decimal, but a half could be written similarly to this. Now, if we say this, I like to tell the kids in my class to say it the big kid way. This decimal, you would say 50 hundredths. Now, if we write 50 hundredths, and I say that because you always say the name of the decimal that's farthest to the right. 50 hundredths, the 0 is in the hundredths place. See, there's the ones, tenths, hundredths, 50 hundredths. Write that as a fraction. We have 50 hundredths. Simple as that. 50 hundredths, the fraction, 50 hundredths, the decimal, and 50%. Let's move on to another common fraction, decimal, and percent that you're probably familiar with. And that is quarters. We've all used a quarter. A quarter doesn't get you what it used to. Okay, a quarter is the same as 1/4. Something is broken into quarters or fourths. One whole is broken into 4 equal pieces. Now a quarter expressed as money is simply 25 cents. And as a percent, if you have 25 cents out of a dollar, you only have 25% of a dollar. Say you had a short quiz from your teacher in your class and you only got 1 question out of 4 right. Each question would be worth 25 points. 25, 50, 75, 100. You would get a 25%, not a very good grade. Now let's look at how these are similar again. Remember, 25% could also be represented as 25.0% or 25 hundredths. Notice 25 hundredths written as a percent, the decimal moves 2 places to the right, 25.0%. But if it's a whole number, you don't have to write that 0.0. You could just write the 25%, but there's always a decimal hidden there to the right of the ones place. We might not always write it, but it's there when it needs to be shown. Let's look at that out of 100 to see how it really, another way to show that 1/4 is 25 hundredths. We just say it, 25 hundredths. We say the place that's farthest to the right of the decimal. 25 hundredths. Ones, tenths, hundredths. Let's write 25 hundredths. 25 1/100ths. Let's move on to something almost as simple. 3/4. We can go a little faster now. 3/4 means you don't have 1/4. You don't have half of a dollar, which also a half is the same as 2/4. If you have 3/4, you have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. 3/4 is, of course, 75 cents. And that makes 75%. 75 hundredths, 75 hundredths. Now I want to start a new page and go over something that your teacher is probably going to want you to do. Kids are often using fractions now, and they're easy to convert back and forth from fractions to decimals and percents by following some simple rules. But let's talk about how you make a fraction into a decimal and into a percent if you don't have a calculator handy. And it's really not that hard. So we'll start again with the 1/2. Now, 1/2, every fraction is just a division problem actually. 1/2 is just 1 divided by 2. So if I was going to convert 1/2 into a decimal, I just have to simply write the division as it's written. 1 divided by 2. Now the first number that you say goes in the division house. 1 divided by 2. You might say, uh-oh, I can't divide 1 into 2. But if I make the 1 into a 1.0, now it becomes a lot easier. Now I'm still doing 1.0 divided by 2. 1 is still 1. So to divide a decimal by a fraction, or by a decimal by a whole number, all you do is you pop your decimal straight up. We divide 2, can't divide it into 1, but we can divide it into 10. Because actually once we pop this up, it really doesn't need to be there anymore, the decimal down there. I'm just going to change my color before I cross that out. Go back to about what we were using. And you always want to put, I call this a caret, but we always want to put a little caret above the first digit we're dividing into. We can't divide 2 into 1, but we can divide 2 into 10. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 minus 10 is 0. So 1/2 is equal to 5/10. And as you saw a few minutes ago, 5/10 as money is the same as 50 cents. 50 cents is the same as 50%. Okay, let's do it the long way with fourths. Making a fourth into a decimal. Let's put an equal sign here to show that these are always equivalent. 1/4 is just 1 divided by 4. 1 can also be expressed as 1.0. 4 can't divide into 1. So we made it a 1.0. We pop up our decimal This decimal doesn't exist anymore since we've just moved it straight up, keeping everything nice and lined up. Now 4 doesn't go into 1, 4 goes into 10. Put a little caret above the 0. 4 divides into 10 twice. 4 times 2 is 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. Uh-oh, we have a problem. We have a remainder, but we're dividing 4 into a decimal. How can we fix that? Well, since this was a decimal, 1.0, 1 is also equivalent to 1.00. You can add an infinite numbers of 0 to the right of your decimals and without changing the value of the number. So we added another 0. Drop it straight down. Now we're dividing 4 into 20. 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. Now we resolve that problem, no remainder. There we go, just what we saw before. 1/4 equals a quarter, which is 25%. Okay. Now let's say I give you something different, and I give you a percent, and we want to change it back to a decimal. How would we do that? Well, let's say we're starting with something different we haven't seen before. Say we have 65%. What is that in decimal form? Well, just follow what you know about. Always go back to the basics. What do you know? You know a half is 50 cents is 50%. Think of 50% back to the decimal form, 0.5 or 0.50. You know 25% is a quarter, 0.25. That imaginary decimal that is always hiding to the right of a whole number can pop out whenever you need it to turn it back into a decimal form. 65%, there's no decimal shown, but we know it's always laying and hiding to the right or at home base to the right of the 5. So 65% is the same as 65.0 percent. Excuse my mistake there. 65.0%. So to make the percent back to a decimal, we just move the decimal 2 places back to the right. 65 hundredths. Now, as a fraction, that is just 65 over 100. Easy. Okay, in summary, every fraction can be expressed as a decimal or can be expressed as a percentage. Very simple. A fraction, you can divide the numerator by the denominator. 1/5. You can do 1 divided by 5 to make it into a decimal. Turn the 1 into a decimal by putting a decimal to the right of the 1. 5 goes into 10 after we pop up the decimal twice. So as the decimal form is 0.2. To turn that decimal into a percent, we move the decimal 2 places to the right. So a 0.2, moving the decimal 2 places to the right. Fill in this empty space with a 0. 0.2 equals 20%. To make a percent back to a decimal, first show the decimal, bring it out of hiding in the percent. If a decimal isn't shown, now you do the opposite. Move the decimal 2 places back to the left. 45% is 0.45 or 45 hundredths. So to make it back to a fraction, there you go. Easy as that. Of course, you could simplify 45 hundredths if you're required to. Let's go over the place value one last time in our summary to remember why we call this the hundredths place. I like to call the tenths place the dimes place, bringing it back to money again, because 10 dimes make $1. That's why it's the tenths place, the dimes place. If this were money, that would be 45 cents, or it could be expressed as 4 dimes and 5 pennies. I like to call the hundredths place the pennies place, because it's the hundredths place, or 100 pennies makes a dollar. Maybe that will give some of you some more meaning. So that was fractions, decimals, and percents.